Yeah, should be good.
Is there anyone, or is everyone ready? All right, good. Contention 1 is immigration. The first scenario is repatriation. Rising healthcare costs and increased immigration makes repatriation inevitable. Paying providers as keys will in 10 cases of repatriating. Immigrants who are lawfully living in the United States and out of the hospital try to repatriate the United States and may declare the condemned repatriation. Because these patients pay repatriation without having a seat, but the main number of immigrants growth and cost of healthcare continue rise. The medical repatriation will likely present as well. Reasonable public outrage when they repatriate non-citizens as the main direct costly patients and uncompensated cares the approximate cost of medical repatriation. No alternative causes. Apple and 12 repatriation responsibilities carrying risk for care reported. Arbitrary medical providers, immigration forces, transporting their patients and opportunity. And Atlantic hospitals working with the immigration officials, supporting the between medicine, law enforcement, economic, and events or minor. Such cases of the hospital volunteering as an insured hospitals do only. Reese hospital would take the for repatriation to avoid the cost of a compensated care. Medical repatriation is deportation by another name increases the risk of death and deterioration of life chances. And why LPI 12 immigrant patients are transferred by their life jeopardized because the facility cannot provide the care. They require to transfer themselves or hand they risk of motivation. If the regions of the federal immigration process no such order of the use of police private actors circumvents the immigration process violence. Right to fair trial to present life to the life liberty personal security by reservation of the countries of the community because of fail exercise of due diligence systematic violation of current legislation access to public health programs does not protect immigrant patients' life. To which severe real fatal consequences for immigrant patients separated from their families. And immigrant procurement will access and repatriation is a form of necropolitical violence that turns vulnerability and pain into a spectacle to deter foreign bodies from penetrating the United States. Only a shift in how society delivers treatment to disease and death can change these exclusions that cause bare life. Joe Bay 15. There has been a shift in the military industry, managed no longer care DHS incorporated care into the bureaucratic repatriation policies that require establishing aliens to the border patrol, establishing the first of the process of the aggressive repatriation post 9/11 security central promotion, the other set of prevention through deterrence. Border security regime in the 1996 explicitly necropolitical actively harnesses death as a strategic weapon to control the movement of the bodies of vulnerable populations. Obama utilized vulnerable populations as spectacle majority of use of security systems in New Mexico, Central America, going to police forces engaging horrifying escalating to indigenous community states, not for project justice, humanitarian care, and aggressive should not be seen as complementary impulses of military medical gains does not seek to cure patients and goals to restore voluntary foster life with the flourishing of post 9/11 military medical gains productive. It is necropolitical reveals the way in which a group of practices exclusion substance forms of citizens, and the plan embodies a radical affirmation of precariousness. Welcoming non-citizens deconstructs the sovereign subject by affirming relationality of different precarity instead of sovereign groupings of communities and refusing the logic of securitization. This is a very long card. Kelsen 15. Most political thought considers responsibility stable countries for community and proposed responsibility for non-members create more open association. The challenge of sovereignty, non-sovereignty starts with relationality. This relationship to the other starts universal circulation without eradicating separateness. The self becomes being unavoidable relationship with others. The racial self-remains unable to cover separation. Being remains unable vulnerable and more deliberate first survival incomprehensible social, political, economic networks. Universality laws raise precarious social ontological dimension fallen body beings precarious is not made. Everyone equal ways people exposed precariousness to we might post precarious will still suffer they have the place of its own. Instead of the space of self is only custom with the equal welcoming. There's no space for itself to rival with the other understanding. Welcoming is what constitutes itself to be what we have our own part of the world. It might be misleading to think about migrants as guests and unequal relationship to host citizens of affluent Western countries who critically interrogate exclusive rights to territory. We recognize self as permanent way to squash the foundation of state sovereignty is good. Who take practices dying to control and defend borders, ethics, and non-sovereignty demand citizens of Western countries declare solidarity with migrants, refugees, establish political understanding, eradicate differences, no pre-established shared identity, available to establish no creative force of political engagement, whose goals match finding parity that highlights the role of solidarity and political sentiment risks. We're not equally distributed political, social, economic structures, organized precariousness, while precariousness is ontological precarity, to reduce their structures, levels of precarity, to provide access to institutions, safeguard, works for providing healthcare and security, television, interest about the fear of the dangerous other, the discourse pushes disciplinary power, the state is a provider of welfare, minimize the state, concentrate the military and police functions, discourse of others are conflict with the other abuse with threat, or unfairly benefit from the state of the systems of care that migrants, refugees, residents, and human labor, the education, including influence that experience precarity, creating blue collection networks of solidarity to acknowledge precarity's political threat, fight with the attention created this way for the actual communities that not equal enough to make differences, but to disappear the naked constantly address force of period, a perfectly legal language, education, chapter, race, class, a community can establish solidarity with non-members, non-citizens, and renegotiates understanding of it of non-sovereign political subject solidarity that presupposes we find things we share nor that members become of our group. This was the ethical solidarity with migrants, so that we are not dealing with symmetrical relationship. The idea we need to recognize the other because she has something to offer is not the best way to approach migration ethics. Hinges on who the other is, cannot be influenced. Debates about positive contributions derail the conversation. States are artificial borders that are malleable to develop solidarity with general boundaries or communities. We accept that we carry other than within ourselves. We might from preconceived identities and identity solidarity allows us to rethink political practices instead of a strong set of chemicals or identities, political action, concert. They can be redefined within a space that allows for more fluid, flexible political associations. And the second scenario is institutional failure. U.S. healthcare is a permanently failing institution with habitual ambivalence towards unequal life chances. The impact is 100,000 deaths a year, disproportionately concentrated among undocumented immigrants and poor people. Coordinated care is key. Light 12. Critical characteristics of healthcare insurance. Some special makes people like the companies of primary care, basic coordinate care, means millions. Because we're rental stores using regular 101 that would, well, that's immigration system also manifests even to true events, any accountability of size of immigrants, who much really work for small employees, they cannot afford insurance, anyway, which make up 5% workforce line, 2% expenditure, patient compare with commercial budget, few sources do not pay well insured patients, only very small portion, 45,000 each with life health insurance, 3 or 4 times more likely to cost medical attention, not for those prescription origins, inequalities, and bill issues, truly from composition, national insurance category, inequalities, and members of the poor from the struggles of professional financial and disorders were covered as the main bottom line of the clinics getting access to specialist mental health situations and other Medicaid, used to county document teacher rules so strict that the immigrants needing medical attention cannot qualify, and insurance is key. Some national measures like clinics don't cause coordination and hurt immigrants into safety in hospitals that cause stigma, deportation, marriages, and 15 messages made. Explosions to maintain safety and medical safety and insurance offered to select healthcare facilities just only universal access for residents due to their ineligibility for public insurance access to quality for Medicare issues, higher levels of insurance statements, get agents and coverage from immigrants, especially they look to for healthcare services due to possible surveillance reports that immigrants being taken over and reported of decreased healthcare access, police careless free driving with the police going to turn around and go home, which is the rational thing to do, but many doing anything, and an optional universal and public insurance system reduces undocumented immigrant deaths and improves health outcomes. World War 11. Real schools will be created more inclusive healthcare system. Immigrants living in small changes will improve healthcare overall undocumented immigrants. Once plan looking at the vaccine healthcare system, Mexico's like proposing that any unique case Mexico will be small operations more for the United States. Mexico's emerging culture and access finding healthcare. Also public service for the small private insurance, universal health insurance, for the affordable private healthcare to every single Mexico. So it's in the 50 million lives along with the worst medical insurance scheme. 40 million insurance if you receive a small healthcare coverage across the place, right? This was the social advantage of those basic most families pay premium based on their income, but for 20% pay nothing. Cancer, health care expenditures to clinical family programs reduce tuberculosis, not to reduce child mortality to 2 years immunization, and a policy that would push for basic options universal healthcare coverage. Thus, the plan: the United States federal government should establish an optional public insurance plan without respect to citizenship in the United States. Contention 2: insolvency. Universal healthcare extended to non-citizens improves undocumented health outcomes, saves the safety net, and reduces system-wide costs, while alleviating the worst harms of globalization against the vulnerable. Calhoun 17. Attempt to receive the national sentiment northeast professors are making because we're expanding healthcare, not just calling a moral obligation. There's a moral obligation for newcomers with healthcare. Healthcare social determinants ought to be distributed on the basis of health needs. Everyone benefits with the affordable health of the people in poor countries have been active by the activities of rich countries. Activities of people in affluent countries are responsible for health and global warming, burning, pollution, and mass addiction. Significant financial immigrants are the health United States. They also use fewer health resource free medical illnesses that are recurring base, which we end up paying for the care of uninsured immigrants, even the cost of greater moral obligation for providing equal access to services. Non-citizens live themselves have a better access to health care, which the prevention prevention and communities will be free from emotional and economic burden, and preventing discrimination. Legal tax prevents federal restriction on healthcare for undocumented folks. Gilchrist 13. Ability to access healthcare should be the most vital to have. Well, when German regulation denying benefits violated equal rights, scrutiny should be utilized. Regulations denying medical benefits just to the PR. WRA should be revised. Regulations now with same heightened scrutiny and positive and posture discrimination based on immigrants as for healthcare purposes should be adopted. And surveillance is pervasive in public health, but criticisms are too abstract, theoretical, and fail to provide systematic empirical data. They must prove overwhelming contextualized evidence to the negative effects of public insurance to win the debate. Clear at all. 17. We identified these 66 issues. Public health surveillance are progressive dealing with evolutions, awareness, the full spectrum of issues. Which ways to become with regards to public health surveillance and most theoretical are not substantiated. It is described the empirical data sees stigmatization as the theoretical possibility to hardly discuss how often, in what setting, or which diseases stigmatization are actually experienced. The empirical literature is adequately taken into account in order to document often documents are realistic on empirical purposes. Many articles in the very abstract level just restate the broad conditions. Already alone is not enough to say the benefits of surveillance need to be considerable. Practitioners need to know what constitutes inconsiderable benefit. If this is motivated for public health practitioners, not shying away from more context-specific analysis determining the cases of our textures will inevitably have to address. And health disparities are not inevitable or predetermined. Decades of experimental evidence shows that universal health provision goes along with closing the racial death gap. Krieger and 10 articles arguing that racial health disparities are inevitable to increase, but it says the case magnitude of health inequities may be historically contingent, reflect the societal priorities that are immutable to social change, or newly underscore the contemporary inequities are not immutable. They shrunk considerably between 1965 and 1980, and then increased thereafter. Rising GDP connects with the observed pattern of dimension, and then increased more. The observed trend can be explained by positioning of social hierarchy because it would not account for the overall falling rates of premature mortality, shrinking, and then widening of the gap. Legislation expanded the political service of poor populations of color, especially African Americans, subsequent slowdown with the adverse impact of the post-1980 neoliberal neoconservative policy to roll back the welfare state, cutting federal responsibility across the republic. Health and economic reform set this capital premature mortality is not even address social justice and body health because it becomes priority. We can make progress. Point is not race versus class, both matter. We need data on the dimension of the impact of racism on health. We need to appropriate categories to distinct terms for measure exposed to structural, institutional, and interpersonal racism. The research is necessary to understand and provide evidence relevant to addressing racial health and inequities in scientific knowledge. Change by self-doubt when people organize and plan to change happen inequities between the mid-1960s and 80s. This case in point descriptive analytic knowledge about the existence of these inequities cluster that was critical to spurring and getting action to rectify them. That is essential for the science and epidemiology of racism and health. The rationale of the work for generate knowledge and included action can inform current efforts to eliminate health inequities, improve population health, and disparities are built on the labor and commodification of undocumented immigrants. Healthcare is a starting point to combat ethnocentrism and address the social determinants of health that really work them from at a 17. Newcomers' occupations are burdens whether health rules, so social circle plays include poverty with which factors make any food they harvest that drives the upon the which whether patients food they care for flood their habits running. For health of the newcomers, the ones who are receiving country, the enormous impact health of newcomers, a place where inclusive can be taken with the result of good health, acquisitive health care is available, possible to modify some social determinants of health.
Mark that, modify some social determinants of health. Modify some social determinants of health.
Okay, everyone good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so my first question is, you say in your plan text regardless of citizenship, what does that regardless mean?
It means without respect to citizenship, so we think the way the plan would look like is sort of repealing of the PRWORA, which is the regulation that Clinton signed in the 90s that required healthcare providers to deny undocumented people access to health services.
So like citizens, like non-citizens, everyone can like use the plan of public option if they want to?
Yes.
Sure, so like what about like tourists who are visiting from like Switzerland or something?
If they're in the United States.
One thing to note is that they tend to, like US with like Europe, for example, and many other states, we tend to like have our citizens covered, they have their citizens covered by their like own national health insurance system, frequently like deals that are transnational like that. But yeah.
So the app is transnational?
No, I mean like,
okay.
Like that's a status quo. We're saying
okay.
Like,
Okay, that's cool. Okay, sure. And so like next question is, do you have like any evidence saying that like immigrants say yes to public health?
We don't have, well, the Mara Joseph evidence discusses a bunch of cases where undocumented people who tried to go to care facilities were deterred because of fears of both repatriation and ICE deportation. We don't have evidence that is sort of like a straw poll of the undocumented community. That's kind of impossible. We do think, though, the optional portion of the plan means that there's not a forced enrollment into the healthcare system. It is,
okay,
if
so
you do want to sign up for the
that's
plan,
cool. I just want to be clear then, so like the plan is a comprehensive universal healthcare, correct?
Yes.
Okay, for sure. So like will private insurance companies still exist post-plan?
Yes.
Sure, so is everyone forced to join the public option or is it optional?
No, it's optional.
Okay, sure. So will companies still produce and make drugs post-plan?
Yes.
Okay, for sure. Okay, I guess like my last question is like, what is this whole repatriation mean?
Repatriation is distinct from like regular deportation. It's when private hospitals who don't want to pay for uncompensated care of undocumented people just put them on private jets and just ship them out of the country without even contacting immigration officials, and that's done entirely extrajudicially. And we think the Apple and Zellner evidence says
how do we know like where how do these like distinct and hospital deportations work? Like where do they go back to?
The hospitals largely don't care. They like fly. For instance, if an undocumented person is from Guatemala, they will just fly them back to Mexico to receive care. They don't want to pay for that.
Sure. I guess my last question is like what is educational about reading public option?
What is educational about reading public option? I mean, I think in the context of the affirmative, discussing ways to provide undocumented people and non-citizens health care is a good idea, because the idea of national health insurance, at least it was conceived, excluded undocumented people from that discussion. So we think the affirmative is a way to talk about that.
Sure.
I sent it, right. It's gonna be 3 off and then case on solvency. You okay?
Sorry. All right, good.
The plan establishes a national health program, which is different from national health insurance. National health insurance means the act is limited to altering the public collection and distribution of funds, not the delivery of care. This is Wallace 80. The terms NHI National Health Service have this different meanings. NHI means the collection and distribution of funds to providers to defray the expenditures of health care. National Health Service means the system of delivery of care to recipients. NHI is essentially a bill-paying activity. And violation, the act creates a public insurance option so the services are extended to the recipients. Additionally, the act is subsets. All of their advantages focus exclusively on immigrants rather than something that requires comprehensive delivery of services to a large portion of the American population. And counterplan test provides a bright line. A counterplan extend health insurance to all immigrants, solves 100% of the case impacts, proves the plan is really subsets in disguise, wanted to appear topical so they can gut our ground. And air on limits national and forms of finance are only limited terms. There's no other constraint shift in the topic of financing provision. At least doubles it. They could discuss actions as a consequence of financial choices, but they can't mandate it since the stretches the neg too thin for detailed prep, and vote neg for reasons of competitive equity and education. Next off is the K. The nation state of democracy had promised a colonial interaction with the West. This is Gross Vogel 8. Coloniality and modernity constitute two sides of a single coin. The European Industrial Revolution was achieved on the shoulders of the coerced forms of labor, new institutions such as nation state citizenship and democracy reform and colonial interaction with and domination of exploitation of non-Western people. Capitalism only one of the constellation of colonial empowerment of the European system. Anti-capitalist decolonization, liberation cannot be reduced to only one dimension. Social life requires a broader transformation of sexual agenda, spiritual, epistemic, economic, political, linguistic, and racial arguments of the modern colonial world system. And one AC's valorization of mobility can never account for a priori death of established the ability to universally fold existence until it takes the mobility of the living within civil society. This is Wilderson 10. The absurdity of mobility as the ontology on the reservation. How is it possible for the dead to move? Where are the dead able to go? Mobility is ethically bankrupt and so to settle on his or her elaboration via its dilemmas. The relation between native and civil society is antagonistic. That automobile symbolizes conflicts at white face and also carries from forward, symbolizing mobility within civil society. Genocide is helps kind of negotiate a right within civil society because her death is the precondition for which one can be contested or characterized in the first ontological instance. This is impossible because the symbolic capacity is a priori dependent upon native death. And the app is built around an inside/outside logic that turns case, socially constructed categories define how we should orient ourselves to immigration and healthcare. This is Jones 10. Group identity categories like ethnicity, race, and nation continue to operate as if they're real worlds and they shape many people's views, lives, and their experiences. These categories are used in ways that reproduce and institutionalize them. Identity categories are based on a multitude of historical events, narratives, and practices are not intrinsic or essential. They are all of the results of boundary-making narratives and practices that reify, neutralize, and fetishize the category as a thing in the world. The category has a definite inside, outside, and boundary. Individuals are either in the category and not categorization. Erase the differences within the category and solidifies the arbitrary position of the boundary. Categories do not have an intrinsic meaning is an attempt to disrupt the apparent fixity of the categories order in the world. We should not limit boundary studies only to these acts of the in-ground of bordering boundaries and boundary process. It should not be interpreted too narrowly. And the effect is a biopolitical protection of life itself, the violent imposition of liberalism that perpetuates structural violence, racism, and global war. This is Evans 10. Imposing liberalism has tendency to be a continuous recourse to war, the continuation of war once peace has been declared, disrupting the distinction between war and military exceptionalism. Liberals are committed to making war to instrumentalize the practice of liberal becomes shaped by war. War becomes complex, dynamic, and adaptive. It is now possible to write up a global civil war to which all life is openly recruited. Liberalism gains mastery by posing fundamental questions of life and death. Civil war now appears to be driven by globally ambitious biopolitical imperative politics. It's a continuation of war, but enemies political struggles must be interpreted as a continuation of war. The mental models of 20th century mass warfare now fit for 21st century counterinsurgency, and the destiny of humanity as a whole has been waged on success of humanity's own political strategies. And the alternative is to begin from the epistemology of the sub-alternative. One AC's efforts to better health insurance options utilizes the same categories of Canada as nothing to foster new conversations reproducing Western universalities. It is impossible to think through the modernity from any other perspective than that of a colonial difference. The critiques border thinking is a way of starting from the knowledge of those in the exteriority of the modern world order. No alternative can come from within the categories of modernity. This is Escobar 2. The notion of extra austerity does not entail an ontological outside refers to an outside constituted difference by hegemonic discourse. By thinking about the other as oppressed, as women, as racially marked, as food, as poor, as nation, the other becomes the original source of ethical discourse via hegemonic totality. The greater challenge comes from the majority of the population of the planet located in the South raises demanding the right to live their rights and develop their own culture, economic, politics, and integral to this effort is the re-skewing of a non-hegemonic and silenced counter discourses rather than reproducing Western abstract universal alternatives and kind of border thinking that engages in colonialism of Western epistemology from the perspective of epistemic forces that have been turned into sub-Western forms of knowledge to engage in border thinking is the move beyond the categories created and imposed by a Western epistemology. This is not a question of changing the context, but the very terms of the conversation. Border thinking entails both displacement and departure, double critique and positive affirmation of an alternative bordering the real. Western arrest and Huntington's of race provides the model to overcome as the rest becomes the sites where border thinking emerges in its diversity. Networks will require epistemological principles with the rearticulation of global designs buying from historical histories with the articulation between sub-Western and hegemonic knowledge from the perspective of the sub-Western with the remapping of colonial differences towards a worldly culture such as in the Zapatista project that remaps a Marxism, third worldism, and indigenism without being either of them an excellent example of border thinking. It becomes impossible to think of other local histories producing either alternative totalities or alternative to totality. Manifold local histories that question local designs go against the cultural homogeneity fostered by such designs aiming at multiple and diverse social orders. And next off is the dissat. The United States is experiencing an unprecedented loss of faith in its public institutions. This is Reid 18. The U.S. witnessed a massive collapse in public faith in its institutions. The last year has seen an aggregate 37% slump in trust across all government. Of all 28 countries measured, the U.S. saw the biggest fall by some margin. It's hard to say that trust decline in the U.S. is the steepest ever measured among the general population. That among the informed public trust is also imploded the United States in enduring an unprecedented crisis of trust. And universal health care is viewed as the vehicle to refoster faith in government. Dreyer Cohen 17. But the American public is still ambivalent and confused about the best approach for themselves and their families as well as for the country as a whole. Progressive needs to find ways to restore American trust in activist government as a force of good. They must be convinced the government not for government subsidized health care is more effective and efficient. And the plan's adoption of a universal health insurance system centralizes ICER's place in drug-making decisions, which eliminates the availability of life-saving cures and a pathway to power for pharmaceutical companies. Britain's experience proves this is Steyer 16. We were urged to his insurance company to uncover a drug that the doctor and patient believed was the right medical choice. Why not? it's pretty simple. The insurance companies don't want to pay us. Cutting edge drug terms and market insurance companies are scrambling. They cook up way to justify exclusion. The Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, or ICER, modeled on the UK's NICE model, judged the cost effectiveness of therapies to determine which health services the government should provide it. If insurance gets to play the role the British government does, determining which pills are cost effective will have taken a huge step. And cementing the control of big pharma devastates the global citizenry, escalates militarization crisis, and circulates care management system, and a cycle of healthcare failures that epitomize U.S. healthcare delivery. This is how Gopian 15. Big pharma seeks enormous powers over the health and well-being of the humans it serves, and corrupt the way the healthcare industry delivers its vital services. The story is the exact same story of how big oil, big agrochem giants operate Fortune 500 companies, controlling governments and force to maximize power systemically, eliminating competition, modernization, synonymous with globalization, privatization, and militarization. As we know, human history has never been closer to materialization by designing accumulated calamity and crisis over an orange drive. What makes big pharma unique is that the industry outspends all others in bright not only U.S. Congress and Farmers, but it's U.S. federal regulator, the FDA. The shortage system is laid with incentives to make people and keep people sick, depending on their drugs for survival that mask and cure, eradicate the root cause of disease. And faith in government intervention turns their case and risk extinction through nuclear miscalculation. The author is speaking in context of Bush presidency, but Trump presidency is pretty obvious impact risk magnified. This is Rockwell 3. Private sector health insurance charge more premiums when risk is high and they fall when it is low. What a contrast to the chaotic and fumbling ways the government failed in order to state we are asking to believe that the White House is not only omnipotent but omniscient and always within anyone controlling the outcome of human choice. The outcome will always lead to abysmal failure. No small group of government, much less a single person, can accumulate and sort through the kinds of information to administer society. The attempt to connect power now shows we are being asked to make an enormous little afraid that the administration has somehow solved the great problem that afflicts us all. The politician believes this, and its contemplated war can bring about massive amounts of destruction and death. Nuclear days bring about the end of the world as we know. A tyrant who carries the pretense of knowledge too far can become a destroyer of civilization. Now it's the case. Trump on solvency. Trump says he'll act against immigrants on welfare soon, but hasn't yet. This is U.S. News 17. Trump said Wednesday he'll pursue legislation of barring based on being eligible for welfare. He said his administration will be putting in legislation to that effect very shortly. It's unclear how Trump's proposal will change the current situation. Next, that terrorist case results in the deportation of all immigrants who have used public welfare and enrolled in health insurance. This is Thompson 17. Trump has issued executive orders that have the potential to rewrite American industry policy. 2 additional executive orders call for the deportation for illegal immigrants who take any government welfare. Immigrant law experts said it might mean that millions of illegal immigrants who have ever received public assistance will be targeted for deportation. It will build a wall around public welfare. The administration's summary above healthcare is to send an ambiguous message to immigrants. And the act never reads a single piece of evidence saying immigrants will say yes and actually use the healthcare. Without that, like, you could vote neg on presumption. And a public option still will wreck the U.S. economy, higher costs, increases national debt, and higher premiums. This is Williams 9. The public option leads to higher medical care costs, lower quality healthcare, and healthcare rationing, lower reimbursement rates, reduce the quality and the quantity of healthcare. They will pay higher premiums. Proponents claim the option will lead to a reduction in healthcare costs. These claims stretch credibility, increased national debt will be used to pay for these public option subsidies. And public option destroys the healthcare industry. This is book 16. There's no way a public option could be sustainable. The program must be self-supporting program. Must be those who at affordable prices. It will be go break within a few years. Require best sums of taxpayer money to replenish who wants to keep premiums affordable. Will run out of perpetual laws. Public option will lower premiums enough to price private insurance out of the market.
Mind if I ask you questions first? Okay. So the first question is, can you explain what border thinking is and the mutual exclusivity of like current thoughts and epistemologies within modernity and the alternative?
Yeah, so Escobar too cites like some different movements that kind of use border thinking, right? So like the Zapatistas movement that was on the borderland was a form of like self-care that questions the liberalism behind the notion of things like the state or even the nation state, and questions the healthcare access for the subaltern or other. We would say that's a form of like border thinking, right?
So we should prioritize the epistemologies of the subaltern.
Yes.
Why is that mutually exclusive with Western logic?
You said regardless of citizenship, and we're just problematizing that.
Okay,
it's
so
just a symboling of that.
Yeah, but is it mutually exclusive with like Western thought, for example?
What do you mean?
Like, for example, one of your links seems to have a difference between the exteriority and the interiority. That's like presupposes like there's a difference between Western thought. I'm wondering if that is a criticism. Like in Western universalities are bad. Like that's in your alt card. Are Western universalities?
Yeah, Western epistemology,
okay.
Western liberalism is bad. Yeah.
Okay. My next question is: you read Lou Rockwell, you read book. They're libertarians. They're the biggest proponents of like deregulating and destroying the welfare state. They fed into the like welfare tropes of like the in the past that have been used. Why is this not like take out all of your epistemology stuff?
Wait, what?
You've read book, Heritage and Foundation. Lou Rockwell, that's your impact cards as a dissent. They all say that like...
We'll say the critique is conditional.
Okay, but that means your ethics are conditional too, right?
No, our ethics are not conditional. This isn't an epistemology claim just because they read authors. Like, I mean, you can make that argument, sure, but...
Case argument, you've indicated we have not read any
evidence that says immigrants will say yes to the plans to vote negative resumption? Like, what is the threshold for this? Do we have to take a straw poll of every immigrant in the United States?
I mean,
and
like,
get consent for the plan?
I mean, like, you know, like immigrant thinkers like do exist. They do like publish their thoughts online, and you know, in a world where your like app is about like we should provide, you know, like immigrants with healthcare, then you know, I feel like their voice should be like a priori.
And like
Sure,
you get advantages based off.
And you
all
get
of
advantages based off of their struggle. So like maybe like they should be a voice in your affirmative.
Okay, that's fine. The disad.
Yeah.
Why is the faith in government lead to faith in pharma industry? Like, I just don't know why more faith in government would allow the cementing of the pharmaceutical.
Like, okay, like those two links are different, right? So what we're saying is that when you centralize like healthcare, like you provide like a universal healthcare public option, then like that gives like big pharma more power.
Why?
Through ICER.
ICER was a clinical.
No, NICE is the UK. ICER is the United States.
Yeah, and you said it yourself, like nothing about the 1AC, nothing about the 1ACCX, I mean, nothing about the 1ACCX is away with private insurance companies. They're still in
Well,
disaster.
sure, but
mode. Companies are still going to pre-produce and make drugs post-plan. You even said it yourself.
Yeah, let's start. And the link on the DISAD is specific to like, it's about the pharma, we bolster the pharma industry, right?
No, it's saying the universal public health options restores faith in government. And then the second link is, yes, that you do centralize pharma, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's twofold, like Johnny said across it.
Gotcha. So I'm confused about this internal link chain. We cause government control, which, does that increase pharmaceutical power or decrease it?
Do what?
Does government intervention increase pharmaceutical power or decrease it? The Steyer card.
We're saying that ICER is in the status quo. These companies are still allowed to produce and make drugs because like private insurance companies.
So, but it's still, can you go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so like ICER still exists post-plan. They will make more drugs and they're big pharma that crowds out a bunch of people, all that good stuff.
So it crowds out pharma.
No, doesn't crowd out pharma. It centralizes pharma. If you look at the kind of like Drader and Cohen 17 evidence, that centralization is bad.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, like we'll make the tag so they're a little bit confusing. Like, yeah.
counterpoint on T? I like
Yeah.
okay.
The counterpoint text is just, we should give healthcare, we should extend health insurance to all immigrants.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're definitely not in there. I did not sign it up, so. We just can't sign it until it's
I know, it sounded
I think UCO will do it. So,
everything's gonna happen.
yeah.
Okay, well,
It's not bad.
I'd rather be in Kansas City, but
454, yeah.
I understand, but I'm sorry that that happened last year, or this year.
Yep, something like that.
I mean, it's been writings on the wall for a while there, I think.
It's on. Yep, same.
Huge, my first
I
year.
mean,
I just
I
use
was
it.
Yeah.
so excited there was
What I
like.
did, I think it was
Oh, yeah, there's that
Just one of
little
those
thing
things
there.
No, I'm fine with that.
as long as
You
it's
good? Yep.
voluntary and hold.
Attention.
I moved my.
Yeah, and I guess there's still like good business triggering got a bunch of drama on the contract habit.
September's really just a bad time, I think, just because lots of stuff happening there too, so
Yeah.
we don't need us anyway.
Everyone good? It's gonna be T. It's gonna be case. Topicality. In case topicality. The criticism and the dissent. I'm actually gonna take a little bit more prep.
Go ahead.
Stop up, settle it down.
425.
I'm setting up the chain. Yeah. No, it's just in the chain. It's like one, it's like two cards. If you want, you can integrate at the top of the case file. The top of your card. Okay, same order. Just tell me when you get it. Oh man, I'm not digging this stand.
Quite slanted,
Huh?
quite
Yeah,
slanted.
it's slanted.
Steep incline,
Yeah.
the podium.
I'm gonna try and use this. Everyone good as soon as I put this on? Thanks for your patience, by the way.
Are you starting with the two cards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, it's on case, so I'm not starting.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. First this evidence is not unique. There's safety clinics that are being in hospital that are being surveyed right now. And there's also Medicaid gives free emergency room emergency room access that immigrants disproportionately use. Means that this is inevitable. That there's already inevitable. There's only inevitable usage. The XO evidence is terrible. It doesn't say that's been implemented yet. It doesn't say if it has force of law. It doesn't have force of law. The affirmative is better. It removes citizenship. It solves it because it removes citizenship categories as a standard on sheets that you fill out. It says that we remove every bearing that prevents undocumented folks from using, which is the Gilchrist evidence, which Trump XO is an example. So we solve it. They say that undocumented folks say no. First of all, it's very hard to just get a large amount of population, especially that's stigmatized and doesn't want to self-declare what they are. So the second part is that it's proven that it's likely that they use the marrow evidence that they go to safety clinics right now for preventative care, but they're scared of cops smoking it out. This is the plan, which makes it literally impossible for ICE to survey every major hospital in an area because we have a very generous insurance, just like Medicare, which is better than Medicare, which means that we're in the right direction. The third argument is it misses the point. It's a deconstruction of ourselves as citizens and what our relationship to the state. We say that the state should we deconstruct the state being only for citizenships. It's a form of embodiment that says that as citizens we should give up and carry our right to this land and only to get the state citizenship and change the relationship to the state and the non-citizens. Now the two next arguments, they say that health insurance, that there's cost, that we kill the economy first, is that this goes against their criticism. It's a bunch of libertarians and people who rely on welfare, who empirically rely on cause welfare tropes, like super users that causes racial surveillance, group art, a national imagination shares with health care dollars that bans the world, define our relationships with cost of fuels, racial identities, and social size, subjectivity in the market, maintaining medical care for cost of neighborhood, discord, structural relations, parental health, convenience, financial privacy, the cost relation, they see how utilize their joint welfare queen and gangbanger in the pantheon, demonize subjects in danger, national healthcare budget, orientation, well, target 1% super users, and acts of deeply structural logic, anti-blackness in American claiming blackness is inherently vulnerable, risky, whistle, unable to be self-sufficient or healthy, as birds organized in the nation, lack of health, insurance is attributed to the personal failed aggravation, failures of the math for the states for rehearsal and surveillance, anticipation of risk and task and payment, free market wages, consumer security, international requiring, last day take on self-responsibilities, raise transfer, and that we probably haven't a link turn anyways because the plan would reduce and administer costs by making uniform billing, and we would bargain on prices to screw over pharma, which is going to be on the disad, and that's how we're probably better for the economy, I guess. Go to Cal. Oh, they don't have an impact to this, so if they have it later, I have to say more cards than one error. T. Topicality, we're going to concede the wing meter on this, which means that none of it to take off. We're not subset, we cover the entire population. Now they just cover the only undocumented folks, but there's two reasons. One is it's a specific test. It doesn't say who should give the tax. It just says that it should expand insurance. But what type of insurance? Is it public insurance? Is it private insurance? You should be very skeptical of this because the status quo is very bad. We already have a bunch of things like Medicaid and high deductible premiums, which are the status quo. They kill. They're very hard to access for undocumented folks, and it causes which means that your shitty insurance is Q and 6. High care of health care is in order health insurance, long-term health is especially acute for immigrants. Half of all immigrants are uninsured. 2 times better than non-born citizens. They face serious barriers to medical care. The 1AC evidence also is in the context of non-undocumented folks. It talks about racial disparities. It says 100,000 people dead, and especially poor, undocumented, or people of color, which means that you don't solve that, and that we have 100. There's probably around 90,000 people that still die regardless of the plan. We're going to read more universality cards in the 1AR if they make this real position. Let's go to the fiat argument. Let's go to the criticism. I think there's a framework that you should vote for the team that just actualizes possible relationality to non-citizens through political practice. Mechanisms debates are good, and they allow for argument refinement towards well-researched positions that are unique because it allows for clash of sexual engagement, which means that we have better intelligent arguments. Having only epistemology alone and scholarship alone skirts meaningful mechanism debate about prior healthcare and policy, immigration, clash-back healthcare policy allows for better research policy that considers structural criticisms into proposals for radical changes about healthcare and pushes community theorized topic proposals and more inclusive critical scholarship. Now, medicalization is inevitable. At some point, everyone's going to go to the doctor. We should have debates about how to make this as unpleasant as possible. Continue 16. Medicalization is a relatively recent having cultural process benefits are the best idea of many. It's one of the concerns in terms of freedom, trust, and healthy individual medicalization entirely reversible out of lack of governance and result in discrimination, power, restriction, the maintenance, self-determination, confusion between evidence-based and cultural definition, disease, poorly supported, health and intervention, not state, the universal healthcare system, increasing awareness of the general population regarding the consequences of nature and nurturing the them with the versus social responsibility for health behaviors to reduce the social economic impact on their communities. Permutation to both the absent and the benefits is the starting point of the Actually, no, wait. One thing to note is this criticism has a giant contradiction, a giant glaring contradiction, which says that in the one hand, they read a bunch of neoconservatives and a bunch of libertarians who are liberal subjects and love Western thinking, and they have a criticism about and their alternative is border thinking, which proves that epistemology is not embodied. Their epistemology is not embodied. That you should reject them for it because they straddle the line whenever to their strategic benefit, which the 1AC has been consistent the entire time. It also means that you can't make any type of authenticity / you speak for other style arguments because you speak from the lanes of first you defend white people, then you say you criticize us for not being radical enough, and now we're affirmative is in line with the criticism. We're border thinking. We're pro anti-Western. We're anti-Western, anti-Western, and pro migrant radicals, and we don't know if allies mobility be recognized it's due to capitalism and a bunch of colonial interventions. The plan is a takedown of the state and its relationship to undocumented folks. Toronto 17. Overlaps migration flows, economic meltdown, and economic crisis, fuel authority, Palestine for the future, and ethical approach to migration requires explicit prominent and welcoming policy which shows liberal inclusiveness, radical perception, shall take Western democracy face values, the difference between charitable international public focus on multicultural might. He made the point that integrating new governments will cover for society and shadow radical approach to foster transformation of society. The rest of the approach needs to simplify the ethics to ensure an inhabitable plan for all life. As we get life to states that world that are border regimes, programs, all taking back control of our lives. I'll read that. Establishing has a progressive plan to regulate the world with the virus from walls from end to end. Imagine new geography moving from climate future toward climate hope defined by just inclusiveness, equality, inequality, anti-blackness is not ontological policy focus is reform that's we don't valorize mobility. We cope with material conditions, but we in 13 anti-migrant immigration and policy choices and values is possible to dismantle this public policy. There's no sphere policy, no destroyed by policy. There's nothing natural about black white divided Europeans that kind of black Africans before those share without black race. So clear choice to make black student a stigma. I'll cut the card at stigma. Let's go to the dissent. The dissad, the app obviously is the destruction of the state. Trump voters will be betrayed by the fact that Trump actually gave cares about migrants. Some of the surprising news is that every conservative moderate will be fucking depressed about this. It also kills moderate, healthcare kills moderates, hopes in the government, and conservatives. This is episode 17. Chapter of major change to healthcare, as well as California single payers. This small ACA coverage for small Americans, small number of Americans. Party lost majority, million, 160 million to raise the government plan. A little against 2018 will require some moderate in conservative areas undefined. Those will not help, and the plan doesn't make any sense. Trump's signing public insurance option would break the GOP and would kill trust in the GOP. Like in 17, should government guarantee health care risk making the relevant part of the GOP as one to make over Hogan be government is not going to have limits to GOP. Refuse to consider Brooks appointment because it once pays out international health service. The plan increases life-changing medicine. This is Sachs Infract 16. Public policy rules that would broaden access, mining exchange, and steps to the type of innovation that would yield greater social value, occurrences, majority universal prizes intended for common chronic conditions, communities, or higher profits, or child salvations will take every day, and for years of preventive interventions, future pricing system enables us to provide care to low-income producers, providers, and companies that invest in drugs provided to the wealthy, such as Viagra, policy managers, equality payments, and pharmaceutical companies like invest in drug treatment, disease that most affect most patients. You should reject the impact claim. This is from Lou Rockwell, who's a libertarian. He obviously assumes that government is bad. All of our criticism on case about the welfare tropes that are bad it means that the epistemology of this is suspect, and you should reject it. I'll read and all of the reason that they think state's bad will always cause violence is from his bias. Private research is inevitable. Government subsidies, self-funding, and big pharma already exist. We at least allow the government to take them down by having more bargaining power. And R&D isn't also key to like 16. No research-based industry will come out in the future, and revenues will come back in marketing. U.S. employers, taxpayers say 40% of research do tax subsidies, high risk research format. Taxpayers, not companies, does not take into account the billions. Not cut the billions. Go back to the K. Permutation, do both. Justified by the net benefits, the impact shows. Go to the counterplan permutation, do the counter plan. It's in the philosophical spirit of the YC.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, how do you permute an interpretation?
So we permuted the counterplan. You said you read a counterplan on T. That
Yeah,
said we don't so
If it's
We
a
make your
procedural-
interpretation. It's not a national health program. This is a public insurance plan. There's no regulations on delivery providers in 1AC. It's just insurance.
Okay.
So, private insurance still exists under your plan, right?
we think we would probably crowd it out to a good extent. We are a giant, very generous free healthcare plan. Everyone will pay for regardless. It's going to be funded by taxes, which is the 1AC argument. This is all the stats go away.
That
But
doesn't
it has
answer
a
my
bunch.
question.
Yeah, we have more bargaining power. Like the Saxon Fract evidence says that we have more bargaining power.
It's a simple yes or no.
Huh?
It's a simple yes or no. Does-
Yes, but to a less extent.
Okay, all right,
To a
on
less
the
extent, of
case,
course.
you did perm do both, and then perm do the counterpart.
Yeah.
Okay, and, all right, so on the Bowie 13 evidence, like, before you read it, you say that anti-blackness is not, like, ontological, but where do we actually make it ontological?
We think the Wilderson evidence, at least my partner said, that, told me that there is an.
Plug your partner. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my partner if anything bad happens, but, I think that, but
Well,
it's.
this evidence says indigenous and settlers are in a position of ontological death.
Yeah,
And that
that's-
migrants won't account for that because indigenous people.
That's
in
indigenous people.
those-
What does that have to do with
Because
anti-blackness?
Wilderson also makes a broader claim about why that also feeds into a structure of anti-blackness and why that is necessarily ontological.
Did the one and
So you can't just like
did
pick
the-
and choose
Did
parts.
the one and C make an ontological?
Well, I mean, your literature.
Per the Wilderson evidence that you make a claim of ontological death. We think that's
Okay,
incorrect.
well, that's great.
Okay, so like, on the dissat, you say that your plan leads to a destruction of the state.
It destroys like faith in the state. for
It
sure.
destroys faith in the state. Okay, alright, I got that. And, another question I have is, does the ACA still exist?
Yeah, I think some of the exchanges would still be up, but it'd be permanently different because like.
Okay,
this-
so, like, if the scroll currently, like, shit is expensive, then, like, how exactly do you reduce administrative costs if ACA still exists the way it does now?
People would probably flock to the free public option.
Why do you keep saying probably? Like, what evidence do you have that says that people will do this?
Yeah, sure. We have a piece of hacker evidence, we think, would say that. It says that
Where is this at?
the Woolbert evidence says that, but there's like a piece of
Yeah.
hacker evidence says that it would
There
be
is
a
no hacker.
universal medical plan. Most financing would come from payroll-based contribution.
There is no hacker.
Where is this
It
at?
says that by running for lower prices, working with Medicare provides the best realistic hope for bringing
Yeah,
American
I'm
healthcare
saying, where
spending
is
under
this
control.
at?
There is no hacker evidence.
Oh, it's from the 2AC, and I read just some lines from it. It says that it would combat, because an employer's size, there would be a limited reason to worry about adverse selection. Some degree of adverse selection was inevitable. The plan would be such a large pool enrolling such a substantial share, it should have lower profit and a small amount of risk. That was a card that I just read. I didn't enter into this process.
Okay, that's cool. Sorry.
No, I said we meet.
Job hours that they're working on, just to make sure.
No, we meet.
What'd you stop your time at?
5:55.
55.
Is that the order? Yeah. Okay, order's gonna be critique and then T.
There's no section. It's just
And just so you all know, I'm starting on framework on top and then moving to overview for decay.
okay.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Counterinterpretation. The 1AC should have been the material and epistemologic assumption of the one of their advocacy. This means offending the theoretical. They supercharge a link with the framework interpretation by including non-citizen and no defense of the nation. That means you can evaluate the framework over our epistemological claims. Epistemology comes first. No such thing as objective neutrality means we should invest in the production of knowledge as a prerequisite to policy outcomes. Protocol 2. As colonial should recognize that we must seek for a specific location of particular regional modern colonial worlds. More knowledges are always already situated in mathematically Western masculine idea that produce knowledges that are unpositioned, located, neutral, and universal is one of the most pervasive methodologies in the modern colonial world. The colonial difference is formed by century European colonial expansion in the modern colonial world system is having a positive process of knowledge production and awareness effort on part border epistemology are precisely determined and prefer interpretation. They can still have their mechanisms in debate, but epistemology turns education locks in current border digging. William 9. The order of the construction is negotiated to the ingredient and imperatives in politics. The framing must be market negotiating activity media framing, invoking borders as thing, and separation to make the sense of contemporary political life not divorced from global politics, but fundamentally a part of it. Any foreign forming constitutional practice, and even then, like Nemitzer, often even makes sense in the context of our epistemology. Turns out, all of them are in a defense of like plan action, but no defense of epistemology means you probably should evaluate our framework first. Go to the overview. 2AC was super messy. You should have a high threshold for evaluating the framework when don't even answer our stuff like the app is built around anti-outside logic, which defines how we should orient ourselves to immigration. Why does the process of crossing a border make someone worthy of healthcare? The fundamental ethics of precarity makes no sense when the app is still locked in a nation-state paradigm. This goes just beyond the link with mission. Our criticism is a fundamental question of why categories like citizenship and legal personhood should be the justification for which we should provide healthcare. This type of liberalism, humanism, are foundation of border politics that use justification as a Jewish power. The app is the citizenship center. They evaluate the framing of the planting-based citizen versus non-citizen. The same one. They could have said, "Oh, you are separate regardless of citizenship in the plantex on the one and you," and we're problematizing this. And it's not the characterization of immigration; it's the categorization of how they receive care. Healthcare is an extension of the border. This border politics. We represent who can get up, and that extends to us. Those same Western epistemology. The alternative is to begin with the epistemology of subaltern. They no alternative defense. So we just have to in the epistemology framework questioning the antagonist assumption of the one was to be good, and you can give 1% to our alternatives obviously because they went uncontested. We move beyond the imposed categories of Western thought by embracing radical alterity of the subalterns, non-production, and your assumption that the functioning of these Western abstract universal is not fluid is incorrect. Every time we use it as a cultural exchange. When you say immigrants need healthcare, they are included in the U.S. healthcare system, which is unique form of border politics, which is bad folding into the borders of biopolitics. And health is the latest modification of citizenship extension into social practice. The app creates categories and demonstrated by cross-examination. The concept of citizenship is fluid and extensive, not simply about borders, but also cultural and social engagement, like the plan GNU 8. Borders are deemed arbitrary or even persuasive. Borders are not just any old boundaries, but it has to be more broadly the result of the threat of a model of territory, state-centered political economy associated with the territory, citizen, political idea, and set social political practices rest on the implementation and diffusion of established political models to define what is used and needed possible in the world. American cultural hegemony has thus really described for the growth and consideration of global nation system looking beyond bordering everything in the effect of that nationalism which has come along with territorial nation state. That being perceptually in a question with national identity has to be constantly intervene through the mobilization of national population. And nothing leaves the room. This is the people's tournament. We all know that fiat solutionary, so it's only about your epistemology, pedagogy, and how you orient yourself to this world. There's no connection between the app and material solvers to get out the argument room. Schlag 3. The world of the judge should produce a reality that corresponds with that world. The reason that we believe the students believe corresponds to students going through complex realities through laws what they learn is the lost version of reality. Intellectuals like to believe the law of investment rhetorical. This is naive. The argument room is the place academic advocates go to argue passionately about politics. Arguments are one of laws. No one pays attention to what goes on. Participants argue about what could have been. They call knowledge. The one thing is that it cannot be talked about is the construction of the room. Politics remain immune from scrutiny. This poses the problem of the left. The victims remain the same. It seems odd that this shows that someone should feel authorized that you should do as a belief that liberation hangs on the laws is the spirit of CRX, and a great deal of legal thought is the development of series operation over and over to perform actions, move on, and coloniality extend their epistemology around coloniality and Eurocentrism turns the app extended across the 8 link the nation state and citizenship provides up to the domination and exploitation of non-Western people. The idea of human rights is a humanist concept of democracy that falls into the colonial power matrix, and the anti-outside logic extend that link. That's the Jones piece of evidence. Public often still relies on group identity categories like the border logic for erasing difference and transgending boundaries. The impact is that the only institutionalizing and reproduces suppression against the subaltern form of healthcare. They can see that there's no meaning of the transboundary liberalist project and go, and you can also extend the first piece of 1AC. Yeah, their first piece of want to see evidence assumption on mobility is equity based on relations, civil society, resolving conflicts on citizenship creates a permanent state of session against the black body and settlers. The impact is white-faced heroes and displaces genocidal violence against the subaltern, justifies native death at the expense of their new model of healthcare in America. This becomes the new antagonism of automobile that symbolize the humanist grammar of progress, when in actuality they don't attack the structure that places people into a position of power and the affirmative fluid nature of borders recreates a new economy of border politics. Actually, I won't read that. And also extend the evidence and the piece of evidence opposing their epistemology to politics, justified biopolitics from liberalism, because their biggest care is a question of life and death. The 1EC project is a perfect example. 1EC is a perfect example of the 1EC is a perfect example of this process. Whenever their Colin 17 evidence justifies ongoing war, military expedition, when life itself becomes the principal reference for political struggle, power necessarily concerns itself from those biopolitical dress of human existence. Go to the permutation. Basic permutation do both, but all these are decides of permutation. Each one's an impacted out reason. That's why they destroy the change for Alzheimer's to Alzheimer's, make it harder to resolve and do all alternative. If we win our epistemology, like I said, there's absolutely no reason to vote for our affirmative in question. Boundaries should confirm they produce our understanding of all the social construction. There's two independent designs of permutation. Sequencing this. They talk about healthcare without discussing the epistemology relation with this subaltern that created conditions that allow oppression to occur in the first place. And B is footing is that they shall discussion about coloniality in order to have their theory analysis nonsense, which makes obviously impossible. But that makes the permanent the permanent prior the plans made prior action that makes them when we target destroys it clash about all the permanent of anti-colonial epistemology that kills all link destroy after skills hold them to the alternative of 1EC. Also that answer framework perm checks back all the offense. Go to T subsets. Simplest piece already ever is plan establishing national health insurance, which is different from national health insurance. The plan text can address the mechanism to nationalize and finance, but not directly who gets access. They supercharge this by saying we need, but not defending entirety, which is distinct. Access is a function of program and service that are never the sole domain of the federal government. States, certified boards, hospital boards, director, and even private insurer would all need to decide who has access and now and how, based on budget provider and availability and geography. The inclusion of the after factors were a creative advantage for the topic where at least double you will vote next for the reason of competitive equity and education extend the wall interpretation. It beats their counter interpretation, which it beats like their counter interpretation, which I don't even think they read one into AC. Our wall's interpretation only definition has bells and to define it also includes this. They can discuss the implication for access, but they cannot mandate it. That's programming. That's programming. No, ensures the violation is explained about by them losing the subset violation independent. Extend the counterplan test. CP extend the health insurance to all immigrants. It solves 100% of the case and improves the plan's release substance guys would to appear topical so that guts are ground. They conflate topicality and solvency. Nope, that's not a violation. All the counterplan grounds is not a violation. Where we normally focus on reading more case studies or running other counterplan global access, we are strategically disadvantaged by the plan. They're only listed a portion of the country. Their inability to disprove the counterplan gives you both a better bright line to vote on T and 6 and would around brief. We shouldn't have to read a third conditional option and legitimize their side of a condo debate because their app expands the topic.
Everyone good?
Yeah, give me a second.
Let's just be clear. The F is a universal guarantee of coverage for anyone who wants to get into the public option. And we do not do anything about like hospital boards. We don't do public programs. What's the violation?
So what? The violation is that like it's a subset. Like this is a program. This isn't a form of insurance. Our wall is 80 evidence talks about how national health insurance is distinct because it's a means of financing mechanisms that allow for things like the board of directors to like do like budgets or whatever for different population health models or whatever and to solve for those. Right?
I mean, like I get it. Like this counter plan might solve some of the immigrants portion of the affirmative, and that's what you're trying to get to. I don't know why that doesn't make us T. Like we will defend the entire population has insurance. Does this take away your T violation? And it's funding. That's not a public program. What is like? Does that solve your T stuff?
Like no, because like it's still a subset. Like this is literally just like this is literally just a geography or availability, which isn't what our
so if we defend that everyone gets health care and that there's no public program and that's the F, is that solved?
And you defend the I'm sorry, what?
So what do we have to defend so that we're T? What is a topical F?
Yeah, so our Wallace interpretation is that it says that national health insurance means that the app is limited to altering the public collection and distribution of funds. So Wallace says the term NHI, National Health Service, NHS, means the collection and distribution of funds to providers to defray the expenditure for healthcare. You said it yourself in your process of the 1AC. Private insurance companies are still going to be left within the status quo of the post-plan or whatever.
Where does this evidence say anything about private sector insurance not existing? It just says that there has to be.
No, it says there has to be a means of delivery care and also a bill collecting activity. Universal public health option does not give them the ability to finance or even give them that ability to like a system of delivery and stuff like that. You're literally just like, oh hey,
no, where is
healthcare is like to everyone.
The one C tag to this card and even the evidence itself says national health insurance means the act is limited to altering the public collection and distribution of funds, not the delivery of care. We're not the delivery of care. Where does this evidence say? Where is this evidence exclusive of public-private like insurance?
No, I'm using the cross-sex of the 1AC to explain our interpretation. Okay. That was all.
The next argument, the criticism. Why is this F not literally the same thing as the KL? We are a criticism of border thinking and a criticism of the borders where you don't get healthcare.
No, you still use the nation state to include more immigrants into the health.
How does the alternative solve the state then? How does it get rid of the state? How does the alternative destroy the state?
What do you mean? We don't take a stance on like whether or not we should destroy the state. We say that this
then it's inevitable. So how does then what's
so you're saying that oppression for subalterns are inevitable? That seems pretty fucked up to me. But
that's
like we question the epistemology behind the 1AC and your assumptions that everyone can get like healthcare. We're saying that is a form of like biopolitics where the state can deem which people are good and
quo. Why not expand who gets to everyone healthcare?
It's gonna be the deciding case.
What's your upset Twitter? I've never seen it. Like, looks about right.
Is it just
you ever seen Jurassic Park?
The case.
9,000 times like I have. This is the chair of our department. Doesn't he
He
like
looks
the
like
guy?
the old
He looks
dude.
like the
Yeah.
guy. He's a really sweet man. He does look like Santa Claus Flash, the grandpa from Jurassic Park.
I can't believe that they're letting you all do this search without maybe apartments.
I get the picture that's kind of more the norm than not around here. They do. I thought it was really strange. They just pick one that like
Is there a doc?
less like they don't have as much volunteer involvement. Sometimes they put committees to do that for whatever reason.
It does sound very Texas, I guess.
I guess.
I'm like, no, if they just assign your ass and you have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only way to do it, or everyone's gonna end up doing more work.
Good? Alright, deciding case. I'll solve it.
Yeah.
No specific as defense on ISO means there is always a risk of the dissatisfied control uniqueness with the Reid 18 evidence along with Trump firing the Secretary of State and Assistant Attorney General last week and 3 other members on the chopping block for the current week. Universal healthcare is viewed as a vehicle to restore faith in a government that is drier and COVID-16. Their only answer to this is that the GOP were great, but this argument is specific to the members of Congress and not the actual constituents which a Dreyer and Cohen talk about. And also, like, it is not specific to Republicans. They are saying that Americans as a whole, like, don't have faith in the government, and that, like, when you pass them, like, universal health care, like, all Americans, irregardless of, like, political affiliation, will, like, have some increased hope in government. So, unfortunately, the Steyer evidence says that the adoption of universal health care now is premature because the plan does not dismantle ICER. When you expand ICER's power, it turns the capability to meet any of the needs of the state, empowers farmers to host wars, and reduces faith in government to the point where we risk extinction. And even if you don't want to buy, like, the extinction argument, you will still vote on an ICER dissent. Like, Brian repeated multiple times in the 2AC that they take away power from private insurance, but that the pharmaceutical industry remains untouched. ICER serves as a gatekeeper of care, and 70% of its founders associate themselves with a big pharma or are part of the big pharma. Like, expanding universal health care while also maintaining ICER will screw everybody. Even if you don't buy the extinction impact case, you will buy that the centralization of the pharmaceutical industry, of the gatekeepers of the pharmaceutical industry, as was done in the United Kingdom, will give big pharma more power to bribe politicians, pay off their regulators, and you know, like, just like expand like militarily. Like, it was the same thing that was done with, you know, agrichem. Like, you know, Big Oil did the same thing. Like, they all became Fortune 500 companies. And like, you know, this Fortune 500 company, like, now has access to like central governmental power. And this turns case and functionally makes things a net worth for all Americans receiving a universal health care, particularly marginalized communities such as immigrants. This is the Hagopian 15 evidence. And all of their answers on this floor were in the context of either the midterms dissad, the politics dissad, or pharma.
Yeah, or innovation, like that's
Like,
not what this said.
like we're literally like the anti-pharma dissad. We're not saying pharma is good, we're saying pharma is bad and we don't need to expand it. We're saying that the plan expands pharma and that is bad because then they're allowed to like control prices and then are able to like write more politicians and have more of an influence in the central government, which allows for things like militarization and like help like
More populations to exploit
and like more population to exploit and all of that. Like, the answers in the 1 ER will functionally be app conditionality because like now they understand what the dissent is, but like that skews like the 2 NR options. So like protect the block, like they should have gotten it right the first time. You know, they had options in cross. They should have asked us more about the links in cross-sects instead of assuming that it was just a pharma dissent because we said big pharma in it. And on to case. Extended U.S. News 17 evidence. This is a co-conceded like Trump circumvention argument. Trump plans to bar immigrants from being eligible for welfare services. Those immigrants who have used public welfare services or enrolled in public health insurance will become a target for Trump's deportation plan. The app does not get insolvency for immigrants because they have no means of protecting them from Trump's anti-immigration policies. This turns any reason that the app would be a good idea for immigrants because they would never get access to that care. And like they also make this argument that says that, you know, they make the Coopers and
they also say that it's inevitable and stuff like that, but that's only in the context of health. That's only in the context of like health care, like specifically if they want to go for that internal link. But like ours is universal. Like whenever they do come in, regardless if they're in that hospital or not.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, you know, it's like also in the context of like universal, in the context of health insurance. So like even like any public service, including public health insurance, public welfare, like all of that, like Trump will circumvent and like he will like, and that will increase that, and that is uniquely bad. And also they try to make this like surveillance is inevitable. Like they make this Cooper and LS17 card, I mean, and they say that, you know, like you know, using like libertarian, you know, authors means that it's like that increases racial surveillance, but they've already conceded in the 2AC, like, you know, probably 30 seconds before they said that, you know, like surveillance of like populations is inevitable. So like, you know, we're just saying that because it's inevitable and, you know, Trump will circumvent the plan, that the negative functionally, the affirmative functionally does nothing to like improve the care for the people that they claim to have solvency for. And also,
there's still a risk durable fiat doesn't like.
Yeah, like durable fiat like doesn't help. And the public option will also increase price for all Americans and that will wreck the economy. Even if it's true that healthcare costs will be lowered, it is at the expense of increased national debt and affluent Americans being forced to pay higher premiums on their private insurance. The lower cost of healthcare will also result in rationing and lower quality care. Doctors will prioritize those who have a private insurance and a subsequent copay that those patients will pay. Immigrants and others on the public option will be left with scraps and not receive the quality care that they want or deserve because of the rationing towards those who can afford to pay for insurance. Like you could also like pull the trigger on neg presumption here because it functionally makes the app like no different for the status quo, and especially for the groups that they claim to have solvency for, including, you know, immigrants and other marginalized communities. They try to go for this link turn that says that the plan reduces administrative costs, which is like, again, like our Williams 09 evidence checks back against this, which is like, yeah, like it lowers administrative costs, but those costs will be offset like in other places. And also, it's like, they also try to say like the reduction of administrative costs is also arbitrary because like it implies that the ACA will no longer exist and that people will in a large amount and large quantity will shift away from the ACA. But you know, like cross-section checks, they couldn't provide like a bright line of how many people will actually leave the ACA and like go to public option. So it's like in that world, you could assume that there will still be millions of people under the ACA, and the ACA will still exist and still have those high administrative costs, which will.
Yeah. And also like administrative costs in the context of like budget process, they're a program, not insurance, so that means they don't get access to these administrative costs.
I got you.
Oh no.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's gone out of control very quickly.
knowledge or the expertise. This person is not a teacher in their department, right? I'm assuming they would be able to teach graduate students and five. I'm like, y'all just don't give a shit. You're gonna let these other
I mean, to be fair, they haven't approved it yet, and they might.
right be
About it,
like,
like, being through a proper committee.
right. I would not be surprised if this, because it's a tenure stream position. It's not just like a you're hiring.
Right. I mean, I've been, even though I'm not a common person, I just don't see
I
it.
don't put any else right now.
I don't know those things that, I know you live there, I had some job talks and conferences, postings, but it's just not, their hiring process is different. I don't know why, or what that says about,
Right.
or maybe they just haven't been hiring much lately, like.
Right.
I don't know. There's a lot of like center, there's a lot of little.
That's also right.
There's a lot of.
That's the upper section.
There's.
Which means that's not.
Like core of that department. Just, I have no context or exposure to them or how they operate. Except that a lot of the ladies wear like very pointy shoes. I hear them cracking up and down the hallway.
Some of the professors.
Yes, I think they might be grad students.
Cause I'm about to say, I'm not wearing no pointy toe fucking dress shoes that you gonna hear me click like it anywhere.
I mean, unless it's like theatrical in some way, I'm not wearing them.
Right.
I'm not opposed for fun.
Right.
When they pretend to be Cinderella.
Right. Not an everyday.
I
Try to
don't
destroy
know
my
any
image.
anymore. I don't know. I don't really know who some of these people are. They're like the poly communications grad students slash like fellowship, but they're not exactly routine positions. Speech people are on the floor too. They're just laughing at it. They're like really good. They're like the Harvard Northwestern speech.
Wow.
Randy's their
Okay.
fearless leader. They won. They basically won the speech version of CEDA the last 2 years in a row. Dominate.
Yeah.
It'll be case, topicality, the dissent. Are there any new cards? I did send out a card. I don't know if I'll read it, but it's there just in case.
So case TDAA, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. Is there anyone who's not ready? Sweet.
Trump's circumvention arguments are largely non-unique. He removed temporary protected status for El Salvadorians, and he's probing the Department of Labor for information on documented people. Now it's just a question of how that relates to the healthcare and care industry, which they don't have any good insights of. We think that the reason ICE can accelerate deportations in the healthcare industry now is because they only place it on undocumented people who go to health safety net clinics, which are they go when you don't have insurance. That's why they patrol there, and when there's a stigma on those clinics, the plan expands every care facility to undocumented people, which makes it structurally impossible for ICE to continue that. They also can't do it based off surveillance or status because the plan repeals the PRWRA, which required the recording of social security numbers and citizenship status to access public services, which makes it impossible for them to just skim the data and look for undocumented people, which means we think we do a much better job than the status quo. The status quo, there's also no contextualized evidence how this gets carried out, just general theoretical claims, which means they have to, you should not give them the 2 hour of grandstanding about why it takes out the case, because there's no real good contextual insights there. Now the next argument, the econ arguments about surveillance. The econ arguments will indicate one, largely most of these are anti-black myths constructed by libertarians, i.e. your own book evidence, believes the choices of unconstrained free choice as a liberal subject as a way to accumulate private property and be a free and moral agent in the world. That is necessarily an anti-black myth because that generated the ideas of welfare queens and super users within the Reagan era as a way to cut social security, because those are always restrictions on those free subjects, which means that any this types of discourse you should fundamentally ethically refuse because they're lies. But also, even then, we think we don't lead to the worst forms of economic collapse that your cards lead to all forms of admin costs. They don't explain how costs can differ to other places. Your rationing or your rationing claims or preferring copay arguments doesn't make any sense because you've conceded the hacker evidence that says we bargained down the price of drugs with the pharma industry, which means we are skimming the profits from them, and they get less profits from that, which means they don't actually have an incentive to go to private insurance people because those necessarily prices for services are still the same because we outcompete with those private insurance claims, which is all adverse selection. Anything else?
That's good.
Topicality. There's literally no good impact analysis in the 2NC, which means you should not vote on this argument. Your interpretation literally says national health insurance is the collection and distribution of funds to providers. National health service means the delivery of care to recipients. The plan is a optional public insurance plan, which is literally a government-sponsored plan that everyone in the United States can sign up for if they want to receive insurance. It is there's no regulation or construction of anything to do with delivery services. They've not explained how that is literature, which means that if you can fundamentally vote on we meet in this debate there, but it is still not explained why the affirmative actually regulates hospitals or delivery care providers. All it does is create an insurance plan
or a different reimbursement scheme, which is literally just national health insurance, that extends it without regard to citizenship. There's also no subset of the population because it's without respect to citizenship, which means the plan is not only for undocumented people, but for everyone in the United States.
Counterplay doesn't solve the affirmative because you drop that you still maintain existing forms of private insurance and you don't bargain down those prices, which will always be exclusionary to the poorest communities and unable to get access to services, which means you prefer the affirmative. Anything else?
Copays, deductibles if private insurance is still dominant.
Oh, that means that copays and deductibles in private insurance are still dominant, which still excludes, of course, members of the counterclaim. This is even worse.
Oh, last thing on the counterclaim, just like they ignore a bunch of poor people and black people because you only do immigrants. You don't give health insurance to everyone. We're hospitable to all suspected populations.
That's fine.
You should say it.
We're hospitable to all populations. All it does is
black people, poor people need health insurance. You don't extend it.
People need health insurance. They just maintain existing structures.
Yeah, there you go.
Good that it's that.
There's literally no analysis of an extinction impact this way. They just say pharma leads to nuclear war and extinction, but no how they rally governments to literally go to war with each other. I don't know. You don't give them the extinction impact in this debate because it's not explained. All it said answer the trans case arguments about why it definitely doesn't trans the case due to crossplay by hacker analysis. Now existing forms of healthcare are fucked up. The reason why pharma is able to control that is because they're able to incentivize insurers to only cover some sorts of things so they can get the most profits off drugs. I.e., for instance, profits off Viagra, which is where the drugs they produce are not life-saving. The plan forces pharma to shift the types of drugs they produce to solely life-saving ones because that is how they would get money in the first place. So if anything, the status quo is net worse for pharma industry because they'll only produce useless drugs where they can get the most profits, which means we'll take out this trans case argument. We make it better. It's also non-unique because these pharma companies are already Fortune 500 companies. They don't really have a good analysis about why still providing healthcare to undocumented people is a net bad thing at the end of the day. Not helping healthcare is fundamentally worse because that just locks in death and chronic illness. Anything else?
Plan unpopular. It's for everyone in general. That's
the plan is definitely unpopular among everyone because it's definitely for undocumented people, which breaks up the GOP and this rallies people to
rallies people for more change. Okay.
You can consider interpretation. You should vote for the team which best actualizes a positive relationality to non-citizens through political practice. That's really important. Mechanism debate is just as important when tied to epistemology. It allows for argument and refinement within debate towards well-researched positions that are unique because it allows for clash and respectful engagement over what should be done, not just how to explain violence, which means prioritizing epistemology and scholarship alone will always spur meaningful mechanism debates about healthcare and policy migration, but allowing for that clash based off mechanisms and questions of what should be done will always turn into radical change for healthcare. It also pushes the community to theorize. What?
Immediate links.
All right.
Permutation.
Now, I think you can extend the permutation A. It's not intrinsic because it does the alternative and the affirmative. There's no additional thing that's tacked onto your links are fundamentally not about the affirmative, because the implication of the nation state doesn't matter. The Kel's evidence indicates that we are fundamental rethinking of what the nation state does instead of securitizing its foreign threats about providing care for people, which that is a challenge to the fundamental notion of sovereign subjectivity. There's no real explanation besides you've just said the nation state, but I don't know how the alternative gets away from that, which means you don't vote on the epistemology question in this debate because you don't know what they do different.
Sorry, no. Yeah.
prices go up means that you obviously subscribe to it just as much as we do. You can't prioritize epistemology first, the dissent. There's just a bunch of link terms that have been dropped on here. First is the faith in the government style stuff. The act of giving healthcare to undocumented people is so unpopular that it means that massive amounts of people just don't have faith in the government. So you should read that. It means that we're a material, but also just a epistemic deconstruction of the state, because everyone gets pissed off at the idea of people who don't typically deserve healthcare now getting, which means that we're a step in the right direction. You have to see that the pharmaceutical industry is evil and that screwing them is good because they are lobbyists that control the government and make bad medicine that doesn't help subaltern populations. Also causes interventions abroad, which means we're in line with the criticism because the act of public insurance is an act of taking back the commons and screwing over Western private interests that go against the periphery. This is all your own impact claims, which means it's conceded and it must be 100% true. The criticism framework. Extend the interpretation. You should vote for the team that best actualizes possible relationality to non-citizens in political practice. Mechanism debates allow for specific research and debate on what should be done in clash in rounds of the question that creates a concept process of finding arguments, prioritizing epistemology, scholarship, alone search, meaningful mechanism debate on healthcare policy and immigration. But the clash about healthcare policy allows for better research practice and structural criticism of proposals for radical changes to healthcare and also changes to theorize how proposals that are more inclusive critical scholarship. Want to see discussion of sovereign subjectivity and citizens crafting modes of solidarity and hospitality on citizens. The method produces constant discomfort with our status as citizens and other citizens of the states inhabit, and why we deserve things and why others don't, and it means that we are a better form of subject formation, and it constructs and how our worldview and our subjectivity is constructed. It amplifies, which means that we are best for Now everything proper. They say that they spill out the praxis. All argument refinement above proves that we also lead to better subject formation. It needs to be access that. They say that non-citizenship, inside outside economy is bad. All the welfare queen style arguments and the other argument on the case about prices for citizens to prove that you subscribe to this value statement because some people deserve healthcare and other people don't. You economize healthcare and you also you also subscribe to identity. They say that the permutation that severance we do the entirety of the affirmative. We don't reject we are a rejection anti-colonialism of the 1AC forefront. That's not severing anything. We have a better relationality towards other, which is all the Cal stuff and the question of subject formation. They now go to they say that citizenship of inside outside. I already answered that. Goes to the Schlag style stuff. Legal reform arguments. Legal reform is good. The question is it's good, but it's not just us. One is we have a nuanced way of doing it. The Cal statement says that we can criticize the role of the state and how it figures to other people, relates to other people, and our relationship and our right to our territory and the right to the services that are provided through our version of the afternoon. You're saying generic criticism of legalism are different. We also, the argument refinement says that legal focus is good because it allows us to have better research practices towards better legal practices and better legal subject formation. Oh.
That was so awkward. I hate that.
My bad.
It's okay. I don't know what to do after.
My partner's disappeared. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay. Good morning. How did today go?
It was good.
It was great.
I mean, in terms of good, the app was gross. But it was like rock opera, and then very surrounded by blackness and oxide, and just said that the representation of suffering is the scenes of projection of black. There should not be spectacles for suffering.
Okay.
Damn right.
Good luck. Shall I?
Yes, please, feel free.
Okay. Congratulations on clearing at the 2018 CEDA National Debate Tournament. You should all be very proud of yourself. The decision is a 2-1 for the negative from NYU. I sat, so I'll start. I think the critique flow in the 2NR, I'm not getting a clear extension or explanation of the alternative or the impact in a way that could get my ballot. I also think they want a permutation. I don't understand how the permutation is severance or intrinsic. If I buy the spin, which I kind of do, or at least I don't think I get a great answer from you on the spin, that's like, sure, like we are the state, but at the same time, we are a state who is ignoring state rules and pretending like all people are the same and don't belong to a state, and we are also providing care, so that's like the opposite of what the state usually tries to do. You know, I was compelled a little bit by that spin. I don't think that the permutation is that impossible. The Schlott, I did spend a little bit of time with these cards that you read in the block that I don't think they're answered by the 1AR at all. I just, and my threshold was pretty low. I just don't think that Schlott card says anything. It's just like it's all just talk. We're all just talking. Like, well, that's probably true. I don't know what that means about the AF. So that's that piece of paper. If you have any other questions, feel free to jump in. I'm also kind of agreeing with them on their epistemology arguments that they're making. They're sort of indicting your ability to win the framework that you have set up based on philosophical and political traditions of literature bases that you're drawing from. And if I'm grading this epistemological homework, I would probably give that a C+, B-, maybe. Those kinds of contradictory arguments, particularly if the alternative to the piece of the obvious that you're going for is about centering the subaltern. I do think it's important to comprehensive evaluation. I just didn't think there was a great answer. To me, I had answers. I just wasn't persuaded that that wasn't at least as important as.
Was that the whole like libertarian argument? Or?
Kind of, but they have a cup. Yes, that was their main, I think, warrant, is that there were a few authors that you read that are not just the authors themselves, but that they're components of the way that on other pieces of paper you speak about healthcare in terms of cost-benefit analysis and availability to certain kinds of people that link to your other criticism. So I'm compelled by that. And yeah, I also think they're right that if we repeal, what's the acronym?
PRWO, right?
Yeah. And do the plan as they're envisioning it, the optional public option, that many of the ways that the Trump administration and just conservative movements that will remain embedded in the US government, no matter who is president, are able to track and surveil and incarcerate undocumented people will be gone. I mean, they would not have the same ability to locate undocumented folks that are seeking health care post-plan, which is, to me is a material difference that matters. And I do believe overall, just on a meta level, they're sort of right about in your AF having more perspectives from policy people who are undocumented, who work with undocumented people, who provide health services, that sort of thing. That is easy to find. I mean, there are a lot of people doing all kinds of great work. Go to La Raza, look through there, find some policy papers, find any, articulate voice making policy demands. If you're going, maybe this is the end of the road for you. If not, add it to the 1AC. All right, that's all.
Okay, I'm gonna go next. So I'm gonna start with the sort of performative or epistemological contradiction argument that Kate sort of ends on, which is that there are parts of the performance of the 1NC and the block that sort of trouble the epistemological claims or arguments that they're making. I think that the problem for me is that the extent of your impacting of that argument is that I should be skeptical, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do with my skepticality.
Say that word like 25 times.
Right, exactly. So I'm like, you're right, I should be skeptical. But I don't know what to do with my skepticality in the context if I think that you're losing the links and you don't get the perm. Right, so I need you to explain that to me, why that's a reason, why the kind of epistemology they've created in this debate has failed. I think that 2NR does a lot of good work for you to demonstrate that argument, which is, the AF doesn't go outside of the room, it's only about the discussion that we're having here. And I think that you're right, if it is about the kinds of discussions that we're having here, then impact out why our discussion should be consistent and why it's problematic when they're not, etc. Right? And so I just feel like I don't know what to do with skepticality, right, in the 2AR, right? I don't know how to evaluate that. And it is sort of sticking in the back of my mind, but I'm afraid to, I mean, it's not really that I'm afraid, I refuse to do that work for anybody, right? I expect you to do that work for me. And I think that the problem for this debate is that the 1AR is hella light on the K. And I think that's what ends up happening. You get there, you don't have enough time. And I think because you don't, there are all of these concessions that I'm not even persuaded by the link to this K from the 1NC forward, right? I think the 2NC does an excellent job of like trying to pull out some texture and some examples and explain the link argument. So I'm rocking with the block on a lot of these arguments, but I'm still sort of leaning toward the AF. I think that the 1AR is gonna do a good job of just being like, no, this is bullshit. Here's the way we change the state. Here's the way that the system functions. Here's what would happen if this kind of policy passed to change the national conversation. Like things like that, I think would have been much easier for me to sign my ballot AF on. And I just don't think that
would it have been
happens.
better if like K came before the disad?
Yes, absolutely. The disad's stupid. They are clearly gonna go for this fucking K, right? So it's just like, so having switched that, it's like there's so much argumentation on the disad, right? You're clearly winning that debate, but then because there's so much argument there, you're not making the arguments you need on the K debate, on the K flow. So I'm sort of, so there are things like, I think that I don't really think that the 1AR contests the link arguments that the 2NC is making. And I don't find the 2NC links particularly persuasive, but I do think that they're trying to get under the AF and say, you may think that the AF is about sort of the disruption of these sort of stable sovereign subjects, and that kind of disruption is important to how we have, formed things like borders and how we form relationality. And I'm rocking with all of that, but I feel like the negative is trying to get under the material implementation of the AF. So things like public option would require identity categories, like those level of the link is never responded to by you. They go further and talk about how it would reproduce oppression, that it creates political projects for healthcare where certain lives become more valuable than others. And I think that you're right, all of that is non-unique in the status quo, but I don't think that's what the 1AR says there, and I'm gonna limit you to what the 1AR goes for. I think on the permutation, I think that, the 1AR doesn't answer severance. The 1AR doesn't talk about why you still get the perm even if the AF links, right? And I think that the negative is very clear, that the links become disads to the AF. There are reasons to reject the permutation, and the 1AR doesn't do that work there. So I'm not persuaded by the arguments that I think that are on the flow. I think that my only problem for everybody is the framework part of this debate is really hella unclear, and I think it's unclear from the 2AC and the 2NC. And so if this debate came down to me having to evaluate the framework, assuming that the 1AR spends 2 minutes on the K rather than 45 seconds to a minute, if I have to evaluate the framework part of the debate, it is unclear to me what the nuance of each of your arguments are. And so my suggestion is this: when you're debating top speed, when you're just reading your writing and not a card, it becomes really hard for the judges to follow the nuance. So you have to do one of two things. You either have to slow down so that your argument is clearer, so that I have to write less things on my flow, because if I can hear the argument as it's coming out, I'm just writing down things on my flow to help me remember that argument is there. And in my head, though, I'm holding all of your explanation. Well, what happens if I don't hear your explanation?
Transcription.
Right, exactly. So now I'm just writing the words down that you're saying and hoping that they'll form an idea. And that's not where you want us to be. So either when you send out speech docs, send us out the doc you're reading from, or slow the fuck down. Right? Those are your two options, right? Because otherwise, there's just nuance happening, particularly with 2AC, I feel like there's a great deal of nuance. So you actually include the text of your framework arguments, which means I actually understand the AF's interpretation of framework better than the negatives, because I don't have yours written out and it's so quick and so fast. So that's just a minor thing. It's not terribly problematic or anything, but it really matters when you get into later out rounds that the judges can hear your arguments as they are coming out of your mouth, because it will make a difference in how we evaluate those arguments as we're thinking about the debate. So that's what I think. I think the 1AR just needs to spend some more time there, get out a little bit more of the offense, explain why even if you link, you turn the link. And why you produce something different or new than the status quo, and then I'm persuaded by your arguments that all of this is unique to the status quo and not unique to the AF, right?
Yeah, I'll agree that I think that the major problem is technical, in that I think that there were probably the arguments that you needed, but I think that in the 1AR, and then even again in the 2AR, there are places where you just don't close the door on a
Should I ask a
question.
question? Should I just not have read anything that they said in the 2AR had more time? Okay.
No, I think I think yes, sure, but that's a problem that assumes that the 1AR hasn't already fucked it up.
Yeah, the 1AR needed to set it up, that these things could matter again, right? I mean, it presumes, the dissent does presume that you're winning something on framework and then an impact to that framework argument that makes the dissent relevant again. And that all could have happened on this case argument, which you do set up in the 2AC, that their epistemology is like a performative contradiction, and it's different than other types of contradictions that might exist. It's not severable, you know. Those types of words, what I was looking for in the 1AR, would have definitely closed that door, because I do think this libertarian stuff is weird to have, and your argument is definitively way more gross than the stuff that I think the AF is saying, that you end up winning a link to, so you might consider the consistency of that argument. So I just think that they win their link arguments. One of the reasons I don't give you the permutation is because I don't even think you said the permutation what it was. I don't even think you said do both in the 1AR. I think it was just go to the permutation. They said it's not intrinsic, we're not, or they said we're intrinsic, we're not intrinsic. You know, so there wasn't really an explanation of how the permutation resolves any of the links, which I think is there. You know, that's the stuff that you want to be talking about in reference to the links, like, and then put that sort of back in your framework argument. I think that the framework, one of the problems with the framework argument, it sounded to me, and maybe this isn't true, but it sounded to me like you were reading pre-written blocks, extending your framework instead of reacting to their framework arguments, which meant that you had an explanation of your framework, but it was not in context to their framework argument and how, and there was nothing.
I think both
there was like,
are doing that too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure. But like what I wanted was, the real problem with a framework like theirs is that it doesn't require any degree of link. Like once there is a link, then the round is over, right? Which is where you need to be saying, you know, why that isn't a particularly good way even to evaluate epistemology, as opposed to, you know, whether or not there needed to be some sort of praxis in there, right? So there needed to be a much more robust criticism of theirs in comparison to yours, and then you can sort of start to fit the affirmative in there. And that way, when you have good epistemology offense, it isn't negated by, you know, the biopolitical medical complex that might exist, or which are links that you don't really, you might not get out of completely, but your AF is set up to say, you know, we're pragmatic, you know, we don't fix everything, but we do question this very important thing that is offense against this criticism, which is a place that I think you really wanted to be. So I think, you know, the 1AR, the time allocation was not good. You need to, both of you need to, you know, really focus on what you could lose on in this round. It just didn't seem like there was anything else that was particularly threatening, although, you know, somehow topicality seemed more threatening than it could have been, because I think like 2AC needs to spend more time on it. You only had one answer to topicality, and then you answered the counter plan on topicality. So make sure you spend more time on the few things that can be threatening, and then spend some more time, you know, explaining why the AF is good. And then, like I said, I think I thought the criticism was not going to be able to be something they could win on, because the 2AC set up this epistemology argument. The block really didn't answer that argument. If your argument is we didn't go for it, you know, which isn't really clear that you didn't go for it. I kind of think you did go for it even in the end. Some of the stuff that sounded not particularly good, you know, that's something that you should, in the 2NR, you've got to protect yourself also. You know, it's, when you get there, you should, if you plan to go, I don't even know why you went for any of the case arguments, really, but once you get to those case arguments, you should protect yourself. Say, it doesn't matter if we link to these, because you can't vote AF on a performative contradiction. You can't you know, the app is still epistemologically bad, you vote against the app, you can't vote for the app because of this, or, you know, you know, we can sever this, or, you know, all the things that you should be saying to protect yourself, and, you know, pointing out that the 1AR didn't extend, that it's somehow like its own coherent argument that is against the alternative.
I want to just add right there for you all that, so we've been working on this Black conditionality argument and why Black people in particular have to engage in conditional tests when we're talking about people who are not marginalized standing up to talk for people that are. And so these sort of multiple avenues of testing become really important to see if we can get under what the real assumptions and sort of commitments of the app are. And I would have been persuaded by an argument like that to help you get out of those kinds of arguments. But you also just needed to sort of straight up answer those in the block, because I do think it leaves the door open for the 1AR. And then I think if the 1AR spends more time on this argument and gets past you should be skeptical to some actual impacts of why these kinds of contradictions are problematic, particularly in epistemological spaces, I think that the negative has a much more difficult time winning in the 2NR if that is set up, I think, a little bit more strongly in the 1AR. Sweet. Good job, everybody.
Good luck. Good job.
Well, I owed you.
Yeah,